How did the D-backs do this season? Well, let's go back to school and hand out some report cards grading the D-backs offense, defense, pitching staff, and manager, all on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work. I've been hosting this podcast since 2020. We just came off a Cinderella run of a season, and on today's podcast, we're going to be grading the D-backs 2023 year. Offense, defense, pitching staff, manager, all of it on today's podcast. So stay tuned for that. Just want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. Now that we got all the formalities out the way, let's actually get into the podcast. And just FYI, we will be doing at some point this week a free agent podcast. I know free agency has officially started. Teams can start signing players, but it's baseball. Usually takes a little bit more time for those star players to get signed. It's not like the NBA where stars get signed the first 3 days of free agency. It takes a little bit longer usually in baseball. And another reason why I haven't really done my deep dive into the offseason and free agency yet is because I was covering this D-backs World Series run. I couldn't be like all those other Locked on MLB podcasts where you've been doing weeks of offseason talk. I just started this week. I still want to reflect on the 2023 season. I haven't even been ready to transition to the offseason. So that's why on today's podcast, we're still grading and handing out report cards for this D-backs team from 2023. But best believe some point this week, we will be dropping a free agency podcast, maybe tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. But let's first hand out some report cards. And we're going to be starting with the offense. But for each category that we do, we're going to be grading both the offense, defense, whatever it is, from both the regular season and postseason perspective. So let's first start with the offense. Let's talk about how the offense fared in the regular season, because like the rest of this D-backs team, the offense looked really good in the first half, almost 5 runs a game in the first half. But in the second half, like the rest of the team, they tailed off a little bit, down to just above 4 runs a game in the second half. And when the season ended, this D-backs offense was pretty much middle of the pack in most traditional offensive categories. You look at runs, average, home runs, OPS, they were pretty much 7th or 8th in like all those categories. I think that's okay. When you look at the makeup of this team, it wasn't like they were loaded with power hitting guys, or it wasn't like this was like the Atlanta Braves where they go like 7, 8 deep, or the Philadelphia Phillies. Like, I think where the D-backs offense finished for the regular season is probably accurate when you think about the makeup of this team, the players on this team. I think them finishing middle of the pack in those traditional categories makes sense. I think it also makes sense in the other categories where the D-backs offense really dominated, because when we look at this D-backs offense, of course, we know about the speed. We know how this wasn't like the New York Yankees, right? When we look at the New York Yankees over the last 10 to 20 years, they're called the Bronx Bombers because they usually build their team to be one swing away from tying up the game. The D-backs were not like that. They needed 5, 6 swings away. They were always 5 or 6 swings away from tying up the game or taking the lead, something to that effect. And when you look at some of the stat categories that the D-backs really dominated in, it makes sense because the D-backs led the league in triples. That makes sense. Corbin Carroll, one of the fastest players in baseball. Alec Thomas, Ketel Marte, like you had dudes, Perdomo, you had dudes who can run the bases and not be slow. That's why the D-backs also finished second in steals. This was a team, we talked all season, that embraced chaos. They used chaos to their advantage the whole season by getting on base, getting steals, using the power you do have maybe you didn't have over the fence power, but considering the makeup of this team with the speed, being a more gap power team was actually more beneficial to this D-backs team because you got to embrace the chaos. When you get doubles and triples, there's always guys on base. And when it's a guy like Corbin Carroll on second base, you have to worry about him stealing third. When it's a guy like Alek Thomas on third base, you have to be worried that any ball on the ground, Alek Thomas might score. So having those speedsters on the bases created just so much havoc for this D-backs offense. How many times do we see opposing pitchers and defenses just get flustered? They're constantly turning around. Is Corbin Carroll behind me? Is Corbin Carroll on first? Is he going to take off? And really, it wasn't even the Corbin Carrolls and the Thomases that really did opposing teams dirty. When you look at this D-backs offense, it was like the ancillary players, the players that you don't expect to take off. That's where embracing chaos really helped the D-backs this season. Christian Walker, double-digit stolen bases, 11. Perdomo had 9. Perdomo had 16 stolen bases. Ketel Marte had 8. Alek Thomas, he only had 9. That's because he didn't play enough. Tommy Pham had 11 for the D-backs. Like, the D-backs had so many different dudes that they could send when they got on base. So many smart base runners. And I think Christian Walker, when I think of smart base running, like, he's not a burner, and he still got you double-digit stolen bases. That's where smart base running comes into effect. And the D-backs, I don't think there was a smarter base running team than the D-backs this season. They were also super smart at the plate. Second lowest strikeout rate in the National League. And we talked about that D-backs offense the first 3 rounds of the postseason, right? You talked about how patient that D-backs offense was, taking a lot of pitches, not striking out a ton. That's something that they did the whole season, making sure you take pitches, wait for your pitch, capitalize on the opportunities when the pitchers made a mistake. Maybe they didn't capitalize to the tune of a home run, but best believe if you left something hanging in the middle of the zone, those guys were ripping it for doubles down the line, and then you were off to the races. When this D-backs team got on base, we know about the steals, but also third in extra base taking percentage. When you talk about chaos, taking extra bases, taking those opportunities, the D-backs all season were greedy on the bases. That's like one thing that I was a little bit disappointed in during the D-backs postseason run, especially as we got deeper and deeper into the postseason. I felt like they weren't getting as greedy on the bases. I wanted to see Corbin Carroll take off every time he got on first base, and that just did not happen. I think the D-backs could have been even more chaotic on the bases in this postseason. And we saw them, right? We saw them at one point steal 7 to 8 bags a game at the end of that Philly series heading into the World Series. Like, they were starting to turn it up with the havoc and chaos on the bases. And I wish we got to see even more of that in the postseason. And of course, this D-backs team also, small ball team in the regular season. That's why we compare this team so much to the Kansas City Royals in 2014, 2015, because those Royals teams were great at the sacrifice hits, playing the small ball, moving the runner over, getting your sacrifice hits to come through into run scoring opportunities. And that's what the D-backs did so good this regular season and postseason as well. Attempted the most sacrifice hits and had the best success rate with sacrifice hits in the regular season. The D-backs were fantastic in that all year. And most importantly, this D-backs team, what was their nickname? What was their moniker the whole year? The Answer Backs. 4th most comebacks this season. That is what I'm going to remember most. The chaos on the bases and the propensity to come back late in games is what I'm going to remember most. Regular season gets a B. Postseason gets an A- because I thought their offense looked really good in the postseason. Tailed off in the World Series, but outside of game 2, of course, they tailed off in the World Series, but thought they had some big games against the Dodgers. You crushed Clayton Kershaw. You had the 4 home run game against, you had the 4 home run game in the finale against the Dodgers. Then I thought against the Philadelphia Phillies in Philly, I thought the offense did a good job of coming alive early in both of those games. Like, it was the offense that kind of won the series for the D-backs at the end, mixing with the pitching as well. I thought the offense looked really good in the postseason. And time again, we saw the Answer Backs in the postseason. I was at, I think, game 4 of the NLCS when Alek Thomas hit that game-tying home run, and then Gabriel Moreno gave you the lead. the answer backs translating from both the regular season and into the postseason. It's why I give their offense an A- in the postseason, a B in the regular season, and probably overall on the season a B plus, because I think there's still another level that the offense can go to. Corbin Carroll's fantastic. Walker, Gurriel Marte all had monster years for the D-backs this year. Corbin Carroll, as it was announced today, Rookie of the Year finalist. I don't even know why they announced him as a finalist. They should just give Corbin Carroll the award. Gabriel Moreno, very good as well, but he has another level he could tap into as well as an offense player. Want to see him make strides there. Tommy Pham, really nice midseason addition. Perdomo was a revelation, great with the batter's eye in the batter's box. I trusted him more than pretty much anyone in terms of knowing balls and strikes. This team does need to add more power this season. I would love to add a big bat, either third base or DH, whatever the front office wants to do. But considering how this D-backs offense looked this past season, I thought it was really good. I think there's another level with a little bit more seasoning from Corbin Carroll. You add a bat or two, I think this offense can explode in 2024. Now we're going to be grading the D-backs pitching staff from this past season. And if you think there's any pitchers on the staff that could win a Cy Young, winky face, in 2024, then you need to head to FanDuel Sportsbook to place that bet, because score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. My favorite thing to do is the same game parlay. When I see the Lakers are playing like they are against the Miami Heat at the time of me recording this, I took LeBron over on points, AD over on rebounds, and the Lakers money line. That doesn't always hit, but when it does, I feel super good as a Lakers fan. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's hand out some grades for the D-backs pitching staff this season. And let's talk about the regular season first, because the regular season, I also like the offense. Gave it a B because there was definitely some ups and downs from the D-backs pitching staff. And just like the offense, it looked really good in the first half. But then the second half, the pitching fell off just a tad in the second half. You look at the rotation and the bullpen, both of them really carried the first half of the season. First half ERA for the starters, 4.61. Second half, 4.75. So not terrible. The bigger issue is probably the bullpen, because in the first half they had a 4 ERA. In the second half, they had a 4.49 ERA. But the bullpen came through and figured themselves out in September down the stretch of the season, and they were able to carry that into the postseason, which is all that matters. In the first half of the season, you had Zach Gallen, Cy Young finalist, or excuse me, probably Cy Young Award winner the first half of the season, star of the All-Star game. And he was also announced as a Cy Young finalist. Just want to say, Justin Steele, you got snubbed. You should have been over Zach Gallen, to be honest. Zach Gallen still, I think because of the postseason, and even though postseason doesn't matter. I don't know when they casted these ballots. Maybe they did that before the postseason even started. But regardless, I think because Zach Gallen's pedigree and what he did in the first half of the season, I understand why he was a finalist, but Justin Steele got snubbed over Zach Gallen. I'm a D-backs fan, and I'll even tell you that, because Zach Gallen, second half of the season, not good. Specifically, like those last 7 or 8 starts, just didn't look very good. And it kind of translated into the postseason, kind of up and down postseason for Zach Gallen, just like an up and down second half for Zach Gallen as well. The bullpen, good in the first half, struggled a little bit in the second half, but like I said, very good down the stretch. Rotation, kind of a revolving door after Merrill Kelly in the regular season. Like Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly were, of course, fantastic. But then number 3, like we had Mad Bum for a little bit. We tried Dre Jameson. We tried Ryan Nelson, Zach Davies. Like everyone after Kelly pretty much didn't work. Fott really didn't work until we got to the postseason. Like the rotation, honestly, would just kind of not that great in the regular season. I think the postseason was, I think the rotation was actually better in the postseason, but the rotation from just the regular season, I mean, a B, because the front line is elite. Gallen and Kelly are as good as any frontline duo in Major League Baseball. But after that, your 3, 4, and 5 was arguably one of the worst in Major League Baseball, especially as you got toward the end of the season when you had injuries already to the Tommy Henrys and Dre Jamesons. Like, I think Tommy Henry looked kind of solid. And if you did have him and Brandon Pfaadt as your number 3 and number 4 starters, maybe things are slightly different in the postseason, but I don't think that's the case. I would really like to see this D-backs team hopefully add a starter this offseason. But the bullpen, really good in the postseason, of course. But in the first half of the season, the D-backs had to rely on guys like the Miguel Castros, who had a good first half, but fell off hard in the second half of the season. In the postseason, Scott McGough never really got behind him, had a little bit of a stretch there where he looked good when he got demoted from the closer role, but never really trustworthy at all. Andrew Chafin, I kind of liked him. We sent him away. So the D-backs kind of had one bullpen the first half, and then they picked up pieces along the way. And then by the time we got to the postseason, we kind of had a revamped bullpen. And I think the D-backs really found their identity in the pen as they entered the postseason. And they rode that identity through the postseason. I think we're going to see a lot of those D-backs relievers come back next year, because for the postseason, I do give this D-backs pitching staff an A, even better than the offense, because I thought when you look at the bullpen, Ryan Thompson, Kevin Ginkel, and Paul Sewald were locked down. I know Sewald sucked in the World Series, but before that, those three were dominant, nasty. Of course, Ginkel never allowed an earned run the entire postseason. Thor Thompson was, once you got the ball in his hands, I felt like the game was going to be over if the D-backs had a lead. And then Sewald, outside the World Series, absolutely nails, and I trusted him. Love his moxie. Love him and Kevin Ginkel's moxie together. I mean, I don't think there's a more fiery, emotional 8th, 9th duo in Major League Baseball than Ginkel and Sewald. So love those two guys, with Ryan Thompson as your go-to number 3 reliever, 7th inning guy, big high leverage dude. I do like Ryan Thompson a lot heading into next season. Those three feel pretty much locked in as relievers. Then the two lefties, Mantiply and Sal Frank, like, I felt pretty good about this postseason as well. Maybe Sal Frank was a little bit more shaky, but I thought Mantiply, second half into the postseason, looked really good. He kind of was good as an opener for the D-backs whenever they did that reverse opener thing and they started Mantiply. He was kind of good in those situations. Sal Frank, I think, is pretty solid as well. Maybe he falls off and regresses to the mean in 2024, but I'll still bring him back. So that's at least 5 guys I like in the bullpen right now. And then after that, we'll see. I wouldn't even mind giving a little Luis Frias a taste next season. But the postseason, bullpen, A. The rotation, A as well. I mean, Gallen up and down, good against the Brewers, solid against the Dodgers, but really bad against the Phillies. Bad in his first start against the Rangers, but then threw a no-no through 6 innings. And that finale in the World Series, when the D-backs were facing an elimination game, Gallen stepped up in a big way. So makes me at least feel confident moving forward that Gallen's got that dog in him. And if the D-backs ever have their backs against the walls, you can at least feel confident that Gallen is going to bring his best stuff out. Merrill Kelly, also, of course, nasty. I mean, I think he might have been the biggest. I don't know if anyone's stock this postseason grew more than Merrill Kelly's, because I think entering the postseason, people are like, yeah, I know who Merrill Kelly is. I saw him pitch in the WBC. He's pretty good. Yeah, the D-backs this year, yeah, they're a good team. Merrill Kelly as their number 2 starter, yeah, I like him a lot. I think it was just one of those starters where people were like, yeah, I like him a lot, knowing they probably saw him pitch 1 start against their favorite team. And he probably looked good in that 1 start, but no one really had any idea how good Merrill Kelly was. People saw him maybe once that season against their favorite team, looked at the stats on Baseball Reference, and were like, yeah, that guy's pretty good, but I don't really know what he looks like in terms of the eye test. I haven't really seen it too much personally. And then Merrill Kelly, that's what other people are saying, not me. And then Merrill Kelly in the postseason lit up the world. I think everyone now is like, Merrill Kelly is a top tier starter. Maybe they don't view him as like a number 1 elite starter, but if they ever see Merrill Kelly in a postseason setting, it's like how you view Nathan Eovaldi. He might not be a number 1, Once you get to the postseason, he sure does feel like a number one. I think that's the same with Merrill Kelly. Him and Gallen, nasty. And then, of course, Brandon Pfaadt, the true revelation for the D-backs this postseason. Because if Brandon Pfaadt does not do what he did this past postseason, the D-backs probably lose to the Dodgers or the Phillies. Like, if you don't have the run Brandon Pfaadt has, this D-backs team does not make it to the postseason, or excuse me, does not make it to the World Series without Pfaadt doing what he did this past postseason. So I'm holding Pfaadt can carry that momentum into next year. The D-backs add one rotation starter like a Jordan Montgomery. And if you give me Gallen, Kelly, Montgomery, and Pfaadt as your top four, I think that's absolutely elite. Would like a little Luis Frias potentially in the bullpen, but definitely need a couple more relievers. Definitely need another high leverage reliever. Definitely need another strikeout artist, a dude that could throw hard. And potentially wouldn't mind giving Tommy Henry that number 5th spot in the rotation next season. But in conclusion, the D-backs pitching staff from this season, just like the offense, I would give it a B+. In the regular season, the rotation frontline duo with Gallen and Merrill Kelly was absolutely nasty. Outside that, a lot of question marks. And then the bullpen, shaky throughout the season, good in the first half, not so good in the middle, and then found its stride end of the season into the postseason. So with everything combined, I would also give the D-backs pitching staff a B+ from this past season. But you add a rotation starter, Brandon Pfaadt continues that improvement, and you run back the bullpen. I like this rotation and bullpen and pitching staff to be pretty good once again in 2024. Now we'll grade the defense and Torey Lovullo in segment number 3. But first, welcome back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's hand out some awards for the defense and Torey Lovullo. And for the defense, I'm just going to combine the regular season and postseason and just give it an overall grade of an A, because I think the calling card of this D-backs team, not just this season, but probably under the entire Torey Lovullo era, is their defense. This D-backs defense was elite this season. You had Corbin Carroll and Alek Thomas tracking down everything in center and right field. Alek Thomas, I mean, I don't know how he didn't win the Gold Glove. I don't know how he wasn't even a finalist. Maybe because he didn't play enough games. Alek Thomas gets to every freaking ball in the outfield and center field. If it hangs up there just for a little bit, Alek Thomas is probably going to track it down, and he makes some insane catches deep in center field as well. The D-backs field, Chase Field, center field, one of the deepest parts in all ballparks, and Alek Thomas plays it so perfectly every single time. Love what he can do defensively. Carroll as well with that speed, tracking down balls. I wish one of them had a stronger arm, but with their legs, they make up a lot of ground at the very least with their legs. Walker at first base, absolutely a tank. He's a wall over there. Nothing is getting by Christian Walker. The fact that he made that one error in the postseason in the World Series, shocking, because I don't think there's a defensive player in Major League Baseball I trust more than a Christian Walker. I assume he's just going to make every single play over there. Like, for any MLB instructors who are teaching their first baseman the fundamentals of defense, I'm just showing them 3 hours of Christian Walker tape, his best highlights, because he just makes everything look so easy, so effortless. And Christian Walker, once again, is going to win, or I think he already did. I'm not even sure. Did they just announce a finalist? Whatever. Christian Walker, Gold Glove winner 2023, and he might win again next season. Gabriel Moreno, another Gold Glove winner, throwing out everyone. Yeah, I think they announced a Gold Glove. I'm getting my awards finalists and my Gold Gloves confused. So Walker definitely has a Gold Glove. So did Gabriel Moreno, because he's throwing out everyone. Elite at blocking balls, throwing out runners, good pop time, like everything you want from a catcher from a defensive standpoint. Gabriel Moreno can do. Plus, he can hit a little bit. Another level to go to offensively for him, but from a defensive standpoint, already, I mean, we saw a Gold Glove winner, so you can already say arguably the best defensive catcher in Major League Baseball. Love that for Gabby. Lourdes Gurriel, not even considered an elite defender, looked pretty good for the D-backs this season in left field. Maybe he lacks a little bit of athleticism when comparing him to Alek Thomas or Corbin Carroll, but I don't know if there was an outfielder for the D-backs that had to make more tough circus type catches than Lourdes Gurriel. How many times did he go back to the wall and jump to make a catch, save a home run, or do something wild out there? Like, I don't know if the sun would get in his eyes in a roof stadium or whatever it is, but so many times he had to make a crazy play in left field. And most of the time, Lourdes Gurriel made the play. Marte and Domo, great double play duo up the middle. Ketel Marte, one of the better defensive second baseman in baseball, kind of underrated in that area. And then Perdomo made major strides as a defensive shortstop this year. Both of them are pretty good, above average defenders. Longo held it down at third base defensively as well, even though he's needing of a walker and a cane, he can still make some plays over there defensively. Maybe he doesn't have the range that he once did, but he can still get to most balls. And he's so smart and instinctual. Like, for most guys, there's a slow grounder coming toward him. He still has the instincts and the wherewithal to just pick it up bare hand, and the arm is still strong enough to fire it over to first base. But definitely would like an upgrade on third base this offseason. Dbacks defense was top 5. Now I'm about to name a bunch of defensive stats. I don't even know what they mean. I don't even know how to calculate them, but just know in all these defensive stats, the D-backs were top 5, and it might mean something to you. Defensive runs saved, top 5. Range runs above average, top 5. Ultimate zone rating, outs above average, runs above average. And my favorite stat on Fangraphs, defense D-backs, I don't even know how you calculate the defense stat, but D-backs also top 5 in that. Outside of the finale in the World Series with a couple miscues and that one Christian Walker play and the Alek Thomas miscue in the 9th inning, the D-backs defense was elite the entire postseason. From the start of the regular season to the end of the postseason, the D-backs defense was probably the most consistent thing about this team. And you got to give credit to Torey Lovullo for, always making sure defense is taken care of during his era, during his tenure, because I think Torey Lovullo has definitely preached defense during his tenure, and it's the main reason I'm giving the D-backs defense an A for what they did in the regular season and postseason. But let's talk about Torey Lovullo and his managing, because for his regular season performance, I gave him a B. For his postseason performance, I gave him an A. I gave him an A minus, because for Torey Lovullo, I still have a little bit of a problem with his over reliance on analytics. Sometimes with Torey Lovullo, he needs to do a little bit of that gut check, go with a little bit of the emotion of the game. Like, I think that's okay. That's why I love like an Alex Cora of the Red Sox, because he uses the analytics, but sometimes you just got to go with your gut and go with what your eyes are telling you on the field. And Brandon Pfaadt is dominating the Phillies. Keep Pfaadt out there. Same with Merrill Kelly and the Zach Allens. Like, there would be times where I thought he pulled his starters too quickly in the postseason and the regular season. Remember how long it took for him to move Carroll up in the batting order in the lineup to start the year when Pavin Smith was an everyday guy, kind of played him a ton, which I didn't love. Sometimes he sticks too much the platoon advantage, which I don't always love. Didn't always love the feel for the bullpen with who he decided to bring out and at what time. But once we got to the postseason, I couldn't really say too much about Torey Lovullo's plans. I thought his strategies in the playoffs, for the most part, worked. I thought his strategies were sound for the most part. Yeah, there was still a couple times where a Brandon Pfaadt or Merrill Kelly, I would have liked for him to stay out there, but I thought for the most part, he picked the right relievers in the right situations to come out the pen. And I really thought he had a strong grasp of how to use the bench this postseason with the Alek Thomases and the Pavin Smiths of the world. Feels like anytime he went to his bench, they came through for him in the postseason. And then also, he did this crazy thing where he just rolled the same lineup day after day in the postseason, which is like all I've been asking for from Torey Lovullo. Play your best players. And Lovullo had this crazy idea to do that in the postseason. Let me move Moreno up to third and let me just play the best dudes in my lineup from 1 through 9. And then I think that was a major reason why the D-backs offense was able to make some noise in the postseason, because we had our best lineup out there night after night. So I thank Torey Lovullo for that. Not much you can say when your manager gets you to the World Series, and I do think Torey Lovullo was snubbed in the Manager of the Year finalists. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreativeTimes24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. Like I said, we might be dropping a free agency podcast tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.